In my last video, I gave a summary of all the video games that I had developed. They were usually small games and were published on each. After Corridor Conflict, I wanted to make a bigger game and publish it on Steam. Shujaa is a Swahili word for hero, and in Shujaa, you play as the titular hero fighting against a dictator who uses voodoo in a fictional 20th century African country. The plot is loosely inspired by the story of the Haitian dictator Papa Doc. Unlike my previous games where movement was stiff, in Shujaa, movement is fluid. There's no need for sprinting because the player moves quickly by default, and you can jump around. This is important because you'll be constantly running from some enemies that chase you and dodging projectiles from others. I started with the prototype to test out the core mechanics and some features that I had never done before. Once I was confident in my prototype, I began actual development. In my previous games, I made each level one at a time. But in this game, I decided to experiment and make all the levels fast in Blender and then finalize them in Godot. While there were some benefits to this approach, it largely turned out to be inefficient because it was slow and some level design mistakes went unnoticed for weeks. For the levels, I went to the dark and gloomy atmosphere, and some scenes are loosely inspired by real-life locations. The levels are interconnected, and sometimes you'll need to find colored keys or activate switches to open doors and unlock new areas. To reach some areas, you will need to find portals, ladders, and jump pads. In other areas, you will need to kill a certain number of enemies to open doors or activate jump pads. Also scattered throughout some levels are secrets where you can find better weapons, more ammo, and health potions. When designing levels, it's important to account for how and where enemies spawn in. Some games load enemies when the game starts. Others will have a secret room, a hole in the wall or in the ceiling where enemies spawn from, but in my game I decided early on to have enemies teleport into the level using a portal. It's a really simple effect. Have the enemy spawn just below the floor and move it upwards. The portal effect is what sells this illusion. Some enemies were made during the prototype phase, but most of them came after the levels were made. They were each designed to force the player to play in a certain way. First, I made rats. They are weak and scary towards you, then bite you. They can be taken out in one shot, but in large numbers they can overwhelm you. Then I have war boys. My original idea for them was a deranged enemy that would charge at you and attack you. While modeling them, I noticed they looked like the war boys in the Mad Max movies, so I added their glowing eyes and a hook on their left hand to distinguish them. Then askaris. Askari is a Swahili word for police. They are standard human enemies and shoot at you with their rifles. They have an average firing rate and are fairly easy to deal with. They are modeled after the soldiers from the King African rifles. Kamikazes charge at you and then blow themselves up when they're in range. I added them after I found during playtests that the war boys were fairly weak. Plus I wanted an enemy that would keep the player on their toes. Their original design was inspired by you-know-who, but I didn't think it would fit the 20th century setting, so I went with the landmine design inspired by World War II Japanese kamikazes. Bombers are large enemies that shoot explosives at the player to keep them always on the move. Their explosions can also harm other enemies. This enemy was actually cut content from the FPS game I tried to make back in 2021. They were meant to act in hordes, swarming and attacking the player, but I had several issues implementing them. For Shujaa, I used a copy of the original model and made some modifications. In-game, they shoot spikes from their arms, have a rapid firing rate, are fairly hard to deal with, and can take you down in seconds, so they are a high priority enemy. The Lightning Shaman shoots lightning bolts at the player and they have a very long range. Their appearance is inspired by the Tuaregs of North Africa. And finally, there's the Fireball Shaman. They teleport around the player and hurl fireballs at them. For their design, I wanted something that could really sell the voodoo aspect of the game, so I went with a human-like figure with a goat head. I like Go in games, so when enemies die in Shujaa, they explode into jibs and leave a blood splat which slowly fades out. I would like to have more jibs, but I have to account for performance and that means fewer of them. I'll revisit them to see how I can improve them. Additionally, there are bosses and environmental hazards like lava pits, spikes, and acid pools. To take down enemies, you'll be equipped with a number of weapons, such as a machete, which will be your last resort if you run out of ammo, a revolver, and though it's fairly weak, it's very effective against strats and will come in handy when you do not want to waste ammo from the more powerful guns. The P180 is inspired by the American 180. It has a fast firing rate and is good for fighting mid-tier enemies. The standard shotgun has fairly good damage and it's also good for fighting mid-tier enemies, but it is not as powerful as a double-barreled shotgun, which can take down some enemies in one shot. Both are most effective at close range. The bolt-action rifle is fairly powerful and is best for taking down enemies at long ranges. Then there are heavy weapons like the minigun, which has a very fast firing rate and it's best to fire in short bursts. The rocket launcher, which has the highest damage but its ammo is limited. And finally, there are landmines. They aren't fully implemented and it's 50-50 whether I'll include them in the final game, but the idea is that you can use them to set traps for enemies. Right now, most of the game is complete, but I still have some work to do and I cannot provide a release date yet. I have set up a Steam page, so head over to Steam and add Shuja to your wishlist. Also, subscribe to the channel, check out my other videos, and thank you for watching.